Hello, beautiful people of the internet. How are you doing today? My name is Jackie and welcome back to my YouTube channel. In today's video, I'm going to finally wrap up all of the books that I read in the month of June 2024. So in the month of June, I read 7 books and I also DNF'd 1. Technically, one of the books was a short story, but I'm counting it towards my Goodreads goal because it is listed on Goodreads as its own independent story. So that, in my mind, counts as a book towards the goal. Now, I read a total of 1,650 pages, which is not a huge amount. A lot of the books that I read this month were on the shorter side, and that was intentional because I need to catch up on my Goodreads goal. And my average star rating was 3.42. So let's get into it. Honestly, I think I might go slightly out of order in this wrap up. Usually when I'm filming a wrap up, I just go through the books in the order that I read them, but I don't really want to end this video on a DNF, so I might switch it up a little bit. So the first book that I read in the month of June was actually the short story, An East End Murder by Charles Finch. This is part of his Charles Lennox series, which is a series of Victorian-era historical mysteries featuring gentleman sleuth Charles Lennox as the main character. In this story, Lennox is investigating the murder in an East End neighborhood of London, and I ended up not giving this short story a rating because I enjoyed it, but I felt like since it was so short, it was really hard to assign a rating to the story. I mean, I bought this as an Amazon ebook, and 50% of the ebook was just the preview for another one of the books in the series. That was how short this was. So while I do think this was a good short story for people who are fans of the Charles Lennox series, when I got to the end, I did have a moment of, wait, that's it? Because I saw that there was 50% of the ebook left, and yeah, turns out that half of what I paid for was just preview of the next in the series. And since I'm doing things differently today, while I'm talking about the Charles Lennox series, let's talk about the full-length book in this series that I read in the month of June. The next book was A Burial at Sea. This is the book that comes after An East End Murder. Though actually, technically, An East End Murder, even though it's listed as being right before A Burial at Sea, based on some references in the short story, it should actually be earlier in the series. That's besides the point. But I wanted to read that short story before I read Burial at Sea, and in this book, Charles Lennox, life is going well for him. His political career is on the up. He's newly married to his love, Lady Jane, when his brother asks him to go on a mission for the government. So he ends up on this boat en route to Egypt, and while he is on this boat, headed off to do this task for the government, somebody on the boat is murdered. So with no police in sight, Lennox decides it's time to dust off his sleuthing cap and see if he can find the murderer. I ended up giving this book 4 stars. I did quite enjoy the atmosphere of it because it is in this closed circle mystery setting, since they're on this ship and obviously they're in the middle of the sea, they're all stuck together, and there is a small pool of potential suspects. So if you're very into that type of mystery, I think this one is going to deliver. At the beginning of the book, I was a little disappointed because we don't see a lot of Lady Jane in this book. Obviously, she is staying home in London while Charles goes on this mission. And so when I started reading it, I was kind of disappointed because there is this development in their relationship that was referenced, but we didn't actually get to see it on the page. And so I was expecting to come to this review and say, oh, I'm so disappointed that we didn't get to see this scene between Charles and Lady Jane, except as I kept reading, we ended up seeing that scene via flashback. The only thing about this book that didn't really work for me was some of the pacing, because basically, without spoiling it, what happens is Charles is on the boat. He's on his way to Egypt for this mission for the government. The way the book is written, he finds out who the murderer is. The solution to the mystery is revealed. And then there's still several more chapters of him going on this mission for the government. And that didn't really work for me. Personally, I would have preferred to see him do his mission, get back on the boat, and then have the resolution to the mystery. So that would have been the last major plot element of the book. I just felt like it was kind of weird that we didn't bookend it with the mystery. Now, why don't we just go through the rest of the books that I read, worst to favorite, so that we can end this video on a positive note. All right, I think that's what I'm gonna do. So, the book that I ended up DNFing was The Clockmaker's Daughter by Kate Morton. I read this for my reading vlog where 1-star reviews picked what I read for a week. I will link that in the card if you want to go check it out. Now, I did not think this was a terrible book. I just don't think it was the right book for me. This is one of those dual timeline historical fiction books. So there is a past storyline and a modern day storyline. I guess actually I can't call it a dual timeline book because I DNF'd it at a part where another timeline was being introduced. So it actually has more than two. But the basic premise is that in the modern day, we are following an archivist, I think she is, named Elodie, and she discovers this photograph that is connected to this house in the English countryside where a famous artist and a group of his friends all went back in the 1800s, and while they were there at this house, somebody ended up dying in suspicious circumstances. Elodie is very intrigued by this photograph, and it inspires her to investigate this group of artists. She believes that the house may be connected to a story that her own mother told her as a child. So we're following Elodie in the present day, and then we are also getting a narration from this character who, I don't know how to describe this without spoiling it. She's reflecting on what happened that summer with Edward. She was there and she's remembering it. The issue that I had with this book is it was just a little too slow for me. It was well written. It had a lot of really beautiful descriptions, but I felt like we weren't getting to the main plot fast enough. It was a lot of recollection and vagueness, but we didn't actually get to the murder mystery subplot. I also didn't connect with Elodie as a character. I didn't find her compelling, so I decided to DNF it just because I wanted us to get to the main plot a little faster, and I didn't feel like I was gonna read 400 more pages of a book that I wasn't totally loving. So I think this is good if you like that more flowery writing style, if you like a slower pace, but it just wasn't working for me. The next book that I'm going to talk about is The Villa by Rachel Hawkins. I ended up giving this book a 2.5 star. So this is actually another dual timeline book. It's a thriller that is inspired by the trip that Mary and Percy Shelley took with Lord Byron to Lake Geneva the summer that Mary Shelley started writing the book that would become Frankenstein. So in the present timeline, we're following these two friends whose names I've already forgotten, to be honest. And one of the friends has become a very successful self-help author, Whereas the other friend is an author of cozy mysteries. She's not feeling particularly inspired. She's getting a divorce and her husband is basically trying to get a share of the profits for her books, even though really he did none of the work. But the more famous friend invites her to go on this trip to an Italian villa, a little writing retreat for the two of them, if you will. And while they are there, the one friend, who is the cozy mystery author, she discovers that this villa was the scene of an infamous murder back in the 70s. And basically in the 70s, this group of musicians, they all went to stay at this villa where the very famous rock star Noel Gordon was staying. And over the course of that summer, someone in the villa was killed. Now, Noel Gordon, he is supposed to be Lord Byron, whose real name was George Gordon, Lord Byron. And honestly, one of the issues I had with this book is if you know anything about that summer, about the people who were there, it's just really not that interesting because I don't think this book is a retelling of that story. It is literally taking that exact same story and just changing some of the details. So there was no suspense for me because this was kind of just like Byron and the Shelleys fan fiction, where instead of being 1800s writers, they were 70s rock stars, and we just added a murder. Their names didn't sound all that different. Percy Shelley became Pierce Sheldon. Mary Shelley, her name was Mari. And Mary Shelley's stepsister, Claire Claremont, she became Lola Larchmont. Like, they just copied so many details from the original story, down to very small details. Like, for instance, Lord Byron had a limp that he was very self-conscious about. Guess what? Noel Gordon also has a limp. And so as I was reading it, it just wasn't that interesting to me because I'm like, okay, you basically plagiarized their lives and made it into a murder mystery fan fiction story. So maybe you would be more interested if you didn't know the story already, but since I did, it all just felt very expected. This author clearly has some not so positive feelings about Percy Shelley, so I guess Percy Shelley stans don't read. I think my biggest issue with this book was it all felt very expected to me. There was nothing that was really that surprising to me, and I didn't find any of the characters that interesting or likable. I'm honestly not sure how the author wanted me to feel. I don't know if she wanted me to like Mari, but honestly, I didn't. I don't know if she wanted me to root for Mari. I feel like she wanted to make it a feminist girl boss book. I just don't know what she wanted me to feel at the end of the day. Like, did she want me to think the characters were likable or not? I'm honestly not sure. Next, we'll talk about the other book that I read in that 1-star reviews picks my books vlog. That was Lies She Told by Kate Holohan. I ended up giving this 3 stars. This thriller has been on my TBR for years and years after I saw it in a Books and Lala video. This book follows an author named Liza. I believe her name is Liza. And Liza is currently writing a book about a character named Beth. Hence the confusion about their names. They're both nicknames for Elizabeth. And while Liza is writing this book, her husband's law partner has also gone missing. And because of this, her husband is sort of neglecting her in favor of pursuing this investigation, figuring out what happened to his partner. And this is causing Liza a lot of distress because they've been trying to get pregnant. She is on this very experimental fertility treatment, and so she's feeling very neglected in her marriage, not sure, where it's going to go. At the same time as this is happening with the law partner's disappearance, she's writing this book about Beth, who is a new mother that discovers her husband cheating and thus decides that she is going to get her revenge. And as the book continues, the line between reality and fiction starts to blur to an extent where Liza is wondering, is she sane? Like, is she imagining things? She doesn't know if she can trust her own memories of what has happened. And we eventually, find out what happened to the law partner. I do think if you're looking for a really quick, easy to read thriller, this is a good choice because I flew through this book. It was very accessible, very easy to turn the pages. I didn't give it a higher rating just because I felt like where the book went was very expected. What happened to Nick, the law partner, not really surprising to me. There was a reveal about Nick that I saw coming for probably 100 pages before it was officially revealed. So when it was revealed, I was like, yeah, knew that already, sis. So I do think this was a quick and easy read. I don't regret reading it, but I don't think the ending had what it needed to make it a truly great book for me. The other 3-star book that I read this month was We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. I thought this book was okay. It wasn't what I was particularly hoping for. So this is a newer classic. Like, it wasn't published that long ago, but a lot of people do consider it a classic. It is listed on Goodreads as being a mystery, but I personally don't think it is. I think it's more so a suspense with a gothic tone. So this book follows a young woman named Mary Cat Blackwood, and Mary Cat lives with her older sister Constance and their uncle Julian in their house on the outskirts of town. They have been treated as social outcasts by the town ever since the rest of the Blackwood family died years ago in a mass poisoning incident. Ever since then, they've been treated with hatred and suspicion by the people in the town. And so we're following Mary Cat in her unconventional life with her sister and her uncle. They end up getting a visitor from a distant relative, which really impacts their lives in different ways. And you do eventually find out who it was that poisoned the family. This book definitely was creepy. Like, Mary Cat's narration was unnerving from the very beginning, but I felt like the reveal about who poisoned the family was so obvious, and I guess that's why I don't really think this book was a mystery, because there wasn't any reveal in the book that I thought was surprising. So that's why I take issue with calling it a mystery. I think this book might work for you if you like books that really have creepy narrators, that sort of unsettling feeling. But since I prefer mysteries, this book didn't really work for me. I don't want to say I didn't get it, because I think that gives you the wrong idea. I got it. I understood what was happening. I guess I just don't understand why so many people love this book so much, because I personally wasn't that interested in what was going on. Personally, I didn't get the love for this book, but that's just me, all right? No offense. If you did love it, I'm happy that you found something you loved. And finally, we're on to the 4-star books that I read. First, The Twyford Code by Janice Hallett. So this is a mystery that did some interesting things. The main character in this book, I forget his name. I'm sorry, I can't remember the names of any of the characters in these books. That's what I get for filming this wrap-up halfway into July. I just don't remember anymore. But he has recently been released from prison. and he ends up investigating the disappearance of his school teacher who disappeared many years before when he was a child. He was in a English class, and their teacher ended up taking them on a field trip that may or may not have been sanctioned by the school. She took them on a field trip to the former home of this famous children's author named Edith Twyford. And the teacher ended up implying to the students that there was a hidden message in Edith Twyford's books. After she said this, she never returned to the school again. And our main character wants to figure out, where did she go? Is there this conspiracy surrounding Edith Twyford's books? And that is why the teacher disappeared. So he's contacting his old classmates, he's investigating, he goes to the library to talk to the librarians, and is trying to get to the bottom of this. Is there really a hidden message in Edith Twyford's work? And what happened to his teacher? What I liked about this book is I felt like it was very different from other mysteries that I've read, and Janice Hallett took the plot into some interesting directions that I personally wouldn't have thought of. So I really admired how she did something different, and she thought of these very complex, interesting clues that clearly took a lot of time and thought. The ending also kind of subverts readers' expectations in a way and does something that is very different from what you normally see in the mystery genre. To be honest, I'm still a month later not sure how I felt about it. I'm not sure if I liked the ending or if I disliked it, because on one hand, it went in this direction that I never would have guessed, but also she subverted my expectations, and I'm wondering, okay, am I disappointed that it didn't go in the direction that I thought it did? It's hard to describe without spoiling it, but it definitely has one of those endings where it was thought-provoking for me because I'm still not sure if I liked it or not. And the final book I have to review in this video is Five Little Pigs by Agatha Christie. Like I said, I also gave this a 4, and I read this book for a little Agatha Christie solve-along on my channel. I posted 3 videos trying to solve this book and invited you all, my subscribers, to read along with me. Thank you to everyone who participated. It was a lot of fun. This book is one in the Poirot series, and it follows a cold case murder, kind of, because technically someone was found guilty for the murder, but did that person actually do it? So Poirot is hired by a young woman named Carla, and many years ago when Carla was a child, her father, the famous artist Amias Creole, was killed, and her mother, Caroline, was found guilty of killing him. However, Caroline, who has since died in prison, sent Carla a letter saying, "I didn't kill your father." So Carla wants Poirot to re-interview the 5 people who were there when Amias died, the 5 little pigs, if you will, and figure out once and for all who actually killed him. Now, because there were only 5 other people who were there, you do have a very small pool of suspects in this book. And you do get to know these characters in a very interesting way and find out that all of them had their own secrets to hide. I kind of guessed whodunit in this book. There was a red herring that I did fall for, so I don't know if I deserve full marks in terms of solving this one. I did end up figuring out most of it, but Agatha Christie did lead me astray in some ways. And ultimately, what I really liked about this book is how clever some of the clues were. When I read the solution and everything was explained, there were things that at the time I hadn't noticed, But in hindsight, I was like, oh my God, of course. Why didn't I see this earlier? And that was what I really liked about it. I also think some of the clues in this are psychological in a way, because it's not necessarily a tangible physical clue. It's more so thinking about the characters as people and what they would or wouldn't do, if that makes sense. I thought this was a really well-constructed book, and the only reason I didn't give it a 5 is just because, for whatever reason, it didn't feel like a 5 in my heart. Sometimes you finish a book and you just know, I loved this book, I want to give it a 5. And this one, I really thoroughly enjoyed it, but it just didn't feel like a 5 to me, for whatever reason, in my heart of hearts. So everyone, those are all the books that I read in the month of June. I apologize for forgetting a lot of the main characters' names, but that's just what happens when you don't film your wrap-up until halfway through the next month. I hope you enjoyed this video anyway. Please give it a big thumbs up if you did enjoy it. It really helps my channel reach more people. Let me know in the comment section down below. Have you read any of these books? What did you think of them? What were your favorite or least favorite reads from the month of June? Do let me know. My social media links are in the description if you want to connect with me on those other platforms. And please subscribe to my channel if you want to see more from me. I post new videos every Wednesday and Sunday. Thank you so much for watching this video today, and I hope you have an excellent rest of your day. Bye, and I'll see you next time.